Yeah, baby, you know what time it is. Now let's get it started.
Are you kidding me? Unreal!
While our HBCUs are mostly known for academic rigor, community, they also know how to turn up.
Does he have it? Yes, he does!
And that might be the knockout punch.
Greetings, salutations. Another episode of the Fangs Up podcast here, HBCU Digital Network. This is home to Herb Stewart and the Black Techies. Look, great to see y'all today. It's time. Like, if you are a wrestling fan, you may recognize that from you. So maybe your favorite wrestler, but it's time, and that's really all that should be said. If you're a FAMU, and I can't talk much trash because honestly, we hadn't beat Jackson State in 20 years. So, granted, it's not like we play them every year, so it's kind of a one of those stats where it's like, oh, you hadn't beat JSU in 20 years, and it sounds a certain kind of way. But at the same point, then you kind of go back and you start realizing like, we've only played them like 4 times in that amount of time. So, and we blew a couple of those games. So, but before we do all that, again, HBCU Digital Network. This is home to Herb Stewart and the Black Techies. Also, home to the Fangs Up podcast. Obviously, go check us out, man. We're gonna try and get some content, a little bit of footage from the OBC. We're gonna head down there, looking like maybe Sunday morning. We'll see. Thinking about it. Might try to, get some stuff cleaned up around the house so that when I come back home, I can come home to a clean house. Just I'm just weird like that. But it's redemption weekend in Miami. And that's really all that I can call it, because at this point, if I hadn't beaten a team in 20 years, granted, again, 4 games, and the last game was what it was. It's redemption weekend. That's all I can give you on that one. That's it. But also, volleyball team, they got a little something going on. But what do we see in the MEAC SWAC challenge? I'll be honest, I didn't see a lot. And I kind of hinted at it. And if you caught the ONG strike zone yesterday, I definitely gave y'all. I gave the game away as much as possible. But y'all know we're a little more concise, a little shorter. But man, we're gonna go ahead and just jump in some of these keys to the game. And kind of what I took away from that MEAC SWAC challenge was that Jackson State established the run. I heard Scotty say, and I'm giving him his credit, Jackson State's a run-first football team. They definitely are. They're going to be a team that they're going to try to establish the run. And if you can't stop them, you can't stop them. But at the same point, either way, they're going to try to establish that run offense. And it's up to you to do something about it. And honestly, South Carolina State really couldn't. And that was something we saw. They ran a lot of inside run plays, though, like between the guards, and like they weren't running and bouncing a lot of runs outside the tackles. They ran pretty much inside to their interior linemen, who are well over 300 pounds for the most part. We saw a lot of that. And I don't have my Xbox controller handy, but one of the things that you'll hear if you kind of go back and you're old like me, you still play the old NCAA football game because it's the last one they came out with. If a play is working, keep running it. We saw that. They ran like this halfback off tackle, kind of like old school. You may want to call it a trap play, but really from a shotgun, hand it off, let the running back run between the guard and tackle or guard and center and just kind of take advantage of it. And they really just ran that into the ground. If you go back and you watch the film, like till it stopped working, they didn't stop using it. And it took quite a while for it to stop working. That was it. Also, that little dump off screenplay, they had it there. Like it was open. And they really used it a lot. I mean, like I said, it wasn't. It was offensively to me. Jackson State wasn't challenged. I mean, they really eat zone defense alive. We saw that last season too, which is a concern because when you look at FAMU secondary is good, and they have the potential to be really good one-on-one corners. But the question is this is the scheme going to allow them to do that? Because I personally think within FAMU's defensive scheme, we could do more. Yes, we're a zone-based defense, but I really think that we could mix in some of those uh, combination coverages, especially some of the combinations that you'll see from people like Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Obviously, they're from the same coaching tree. Well, not from the same, but Saban is from the Belichick coaching tree. So you can kind of see, like, within their secondary coaching scheme, some of the really cool things. If you want to see some of that and like have it broken down, check out there's an FSU podcast, X's and O's, where they literally break down the defensive coverages. I think FAMU could run a lot of that. Just saying, I mean, it's challenging, but I think with the experienced secondary that FAMU has, I think you could run some of those coverages that give the corners the option of running either a man or a zone. But then what you're depending on is the safety over the top, ensuring that they're the deepest of the deep and that they're playing in sound positions. But I think you could really mess them up if you're running those kind of coverages that challenge the quarterback to kind of slow down and read, especially with your defensive ends, Anthony Dunn and just General Hunt on the interior. I really think that's going to be a problem because while General Hunt is not the tallest defensive lineman, he's stocky and he's solid. He's a solid 300-pound guy. Like, he's not a flubby fat 300. That's the guy that's 300 pounds and you're gonna feel it. So I think that's going to be one of the big things with FAMU going against Jackson State's offense. Also, eye discipline. You've heard it from multiple people, and it's because when you watch the South Carolina State game, the number one thing we noticed was that their safeties were getting killed. And the safeties were getting killed because they're looking in the backfield like they are about to stop a run from 20 yards away. And it's a play action pass. And all of a sudden there's a tight end or a receiver running past them. And yeah, something you can't have. I mean, you just can't have that if you're gonna have success in this. Defensively, Jackson State showed me multiple fronts, mainly a 4-2-5 and a 3-3-5 stack. But in the past, they were kind of a 3-4 base. Now they're fast, and their interior line is solid. Again, their defensive ends, I don't know if they were challenged, but their interior line they were solid. Like, they could be had, especially because FAMU has several running backs that have experience and size, but that was there. But they also attacked the ball. Like, and when I mean attack the ball, go back and watch how many times. Okay, you got to watch almost the whole game for it. But when the Jackson State receiver caught the ball, the South Carolina State, receiver caught the ball. The Jackson State defenders were going for the ball. Like, they were trying to either punch the ball out. Like, there's some place where you literally see the Jackson State player throwing a punch at the ball. Very similar to what was it, Peanut Tillman, when you watch him trying to go for the ball and force fumbles. You saw that. Don't be surprised if that's not something you see again. And that's something that could really keep the game close. I mean, my score prediction. And at this point, I'm not moving it. I wasn't impressed by the South Carolina State game enough to move my score prediction. But at the same point, those are some of the things that I think we're going to see. Watch for them to try to strip. Watch for them to try to rip. But that also gives you benefits and bonuses. Because if you have big running backs that are focusing on holding the ball when they run the ball and the other team tries to strip them, that's a chance for a missed tackle to happen. We saw that. And you definitely saw where South Carolina State got in a groove running the ball. Look for FAMU to do the same. I think FAMU tries to establish the run early. I'm just, that's my thing. And then special teams, Jackson State's kicker missed some field goals. Like, if you listen to ONG Strike Zone last night, I said, FAMU's kicking is a question mark for me. Jackson State's kicker ain't much better. I mean, Buddy doinked one, if I remember correctly, off the goalpost. I mean, it wasn't all gravy kicking wise for them. I think that's going to be huge. Other things were penalties. Like, we know Willie Simmons is kind of, with the penalties, he's kind of like certain penalties I'm cool with, some I'm not. You got to limit the penalties and limit the mistakes. I mean, we understand the team is pretty much ain't nothing that going on in Miami this weekend. Like, for all those people that are talking about the OBC being this great experience, not for FAMU's football team this year. It's not what it has been. This year, the most they're getting per Coach Simmons is a trip to the movies. Hell, you can go to the movies for free in Tallahassee. I mean, if not free, damn near next to it, because it's not like FAMU doesn't own a movie theater and you don't share an IMAX theater with Florida State. So I'm just saying, they're not doing any type of going to the beach. There's not a lot of cultural experiences. This is straight up football. That's all they're doing. You going down there to play a game, end the streak, and bring your tail back home. That's it. Now, some of that also may be so that you can share and spread some of this money out so that you can fly other places. Could be that too. But we're being sold that it's a business trip. And it is. But I would wonder how much of that is also the fact that you probably need to fly 3 times instead of twice this year. So maybe want to spread them dollars out or stretch them dollars out a little bit more. Other thing, man, look, we got to block. FAMU's got to block, and you got to get off blocks. Like, those are going to be some big things that we do. So let me start making sure I stay focused, because at this point I hit some of my lines, my notes. But with FAMU, what do we have to do offensively? I pointed out Jackson State, kind of their offense, their defense. Big things for Jackson State's offense again. Jackson State's offense, they're a run first team from what we saw. They also like to run behind the guards. I got that they ran a lot to the left. That was just something I noticed. And that they run the same play over and over again. They were solid against zone coverage. And then with the defense, I pointed out multiple fronts, mainly that I saw 3-2-3-3-5 and 4-2-5. Now, what FAMU has to do, FAMU's offensively, first thing, you got to establish a run. Like, you gotta do that. Also, like I said, you got to limit the mistakes. But you got to play really. One thing I love that Brian said in the ONG strike zone, I don't want to see no stinking trick plays. I'm sorry. Unless we're up 3 touchdowns, I don't want to see a trick play. If you're showing me flea flicker first play of the game, I'm questioning, do you have a game plan? Like, either you don't have a game plan or you just don't respect them. And one of the questions in this game for FAMU's offense that we really ain't talking a lot about, Jackson State's corners. Like, I pointed this out earlier, that Jackson State has very young corners. Like, they got a corner from Tallahassee that might be starting, going against seniors and juniors at the receiver position, and you're asking them to cover those guys. I'm just saying, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, it's cool to sell you this Jackson State never left thing. Because honestly, if TC has the kind of season that maybe Jackson State can have, that's going to be the argument. It's not that they're back, it's that they never left. I struggle to accept that. I just do. And it's not me being a hater thing, because I'm not a hater. I don't cheer for Jackson State to lose. I'll be honest, the MEAC SWAC challenge, I kind of didn't care. Just because, as much as I respect South Carolina State, I don't like South Carolina State. I mean, I honestly don't like Buddy Pugh, because he's a good coach and he's gotten in the way of my Rattlers getting some stuff. Like, South Carolina State's never been a pushover. So, and then you got Jackson State. I'm definitely not cheering for them. So in this case, I'm not a hater. It's just the fact of the matter is, you got to do some things. And offensively, You can't become one-dimensional. Like FAMU's offense can, and offensively, we can get locked in and stubbornly focused on doing one thing. Most times when we do that, it's we get focused on throwing the ball. Can't make Musa, can't try to make Musa Brett Favre. Like, no. Musa needs to be Brad Johnson in this game. And that's, for some of those who don't know, you're like, who the heck is Brad Johnson? For some of y'all who do know, you're going to be kind of laughing and snickering, but think about it. Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl with the Bucs. They had a really solid receiving core as far as like you had Keenan McCardell kind of at the end of his career, Keyshawn Johnson at the end of his career, but you also had a great running game. And the Bucs thing that year was pound the rock. It got them to a Super Bowl. And I think that's something that FAMU's going to have that balance. You got to have that balance. You can't become so determined to pass the ball that you want to give Musa stats that he doesn't need. Because at a certain level, he doesn't need these stats. And the stats he doesn't need are interceptions because we're trying to force balls to happen. We can't be forcing jump balls to 5-6 receivers. That's not a plan. That's not a plan for success. We kind of noticed, and it was pointed out last night when we were doing the show, like, yo, Jackson State threw a lot of short passes. And I love that Vaughn pointed out a lot of quarterbacks do. The best quarterbacks aren't just flinging it 70 yards down the field. They take what they can get, and then if a big play breaks, it breaks. I think FAMU's going to have to do that. You're going to have to play into what your offense truly does well. And what FAMU's offense does, especially receiver-wise, really well, is utilize guys that aren't the tallest, that aren't the biggest, and put them in space and allow them to what FAMU has always been known for in the modern generation of FAMU excellence, running after the catch. Like, go back and look at a lot of those Jaquay Nunley routes and Kanan Lamb and all those guys. And all of a sudden, you're going to notice those guys did a lot of running after the catch. They caught short passes, caught a block, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they got 170 yards catching or receiving because they made it happen after they caught the ball. Something FAMU's going to have to do. Moose has got to take the smart routes. You also should utilize the tight ends more. The tight end is probably the most underutilized position in FAMU's offense, and I've definitely brought it up. And because you have good tight ends, you have really good tight ends this year. It's a position that if you put into this game, there's no reason FAMU football can't win and can't excel. Like, the tight end position at FAMU is strong, and there's no reason that it shouldn't be that kind of surprise. Like, oh crap, they're actually using the tight ends because now the linebackers have to come up in coverage. Maybe the safeties come up. If you get the running game going a little bit, now the play action comes into play. And we've seen what FAMU's play action can be, especially when you're running the wheel routes, when you're running those corner routes. Like, there are certain routes in the Xavier Smith route tree that other receivers in this offense can replicate. I'm looking at you, Riley. I'm looking at you, K-Dot, to a certain degree. And honestly, look, I'm looking at my man from that transfer from Buffalo too. Like, these receivers can run a lot of those routes and can have similar success, if not the same. It just may not be as compartmentalized as being into one person. It's going to be spread out amongst the receiving core. And I think, honestly, that's going to be a big difference you have this year. Also, Moose has got to make smart decisions. Like, you ain't got to win the game by yourself. You're a senior, and in the worst moments of last season, sometimes we didn't set him up to succeed. And sometimes I really felt like Musa was playing safe because he knew what was behind him. And not saying he knew what was behind him is a good thing. He knew that from me to the next guy is a gulf. And I think this year from Musa to the next guy isn't a gulf. It ain't close, but it ain't the gulf that it was last year, where the next guy behind Musa, you were like, okay, he can do this, but can he do it at the level Musa can do it? Whereas I think Junior's your backup, and kind of like Willie Simmons pointed out, Junior's got some moments where you're over there sitting there, that boy good, that boy good. And you got other moments like, what the hell is he doing? Like, what the hell is this guy? Like, he hasn't got that consistency yet. He can get it though. And he's got that it factor potential. I think Junior is closer to Ryan Stanley than a lot of us realize, for better or worse. And hopefully my dad didn't hear that, because Ryan Stanley ain't his favorite quarterback. But I think with Junior and you look at Ryan Stanley, you're looking at quarterbacks that are very similar as far as skill set, talent, ability. The biggest thing Stanley had at this point over Musa was probably understanding the offense. And Junior understands the offense. It's just that he's behind Musa. So I think you're probably going to see Musa run the ball more this year. I think this will be a year where if we can protect Musa, we are going to see more of that quarterback option than we've seen in a long time. That's just, I hadn't been at the practice to see that, but just looking from my perspective and knowing our depth chart, where we are offensive line wise, where we are running back wise, I can, and then going back and seeing the spring game, seeing how, hey, Musa calls his own number to win the spring game. All of a sudden I start, that gets my wheels turning. And I'm like, this offense is going to have more quarterback option plays, because those plays freeze the defensive ends. They slow down the defensive end, because now the defensive end is who the quarterback is reading off of. But now the end has to make a decision. Do I continue to crash and take this running back, or do I take this quarterback? And we saw last year in Shador what can happen when a quarterback who's maybe not a native runner adds that to his toolkit. And I think Musa's got it. And we saw where with Shador, the difference was his ability to slide. Can Musa slide? I think he can. But I think that's going to be something that's going to be an added cog in there. And I told you, I just looking at what I saw at the end of last year, what I saw in the spring game, and how all of a sudden, just look at the end of the season, FAMU starts running the ball with Musa just a little bit more. Now he does get hurt. He comes out Florida Classic. I believe Musa does get hurt. But still, don't be surprised you see that, because I think this first game of the season, you're not going to leave anything in there, because especially considering if something happens, and prayerfully it doesn't, you got 2 weeks to recover. I mean, we're playing for Atlanta. We're not playing for the playoffs. So let's be realistic about this. No one cares what happens in Tampa except for us FAMUans. And with West Florida, win or lose, nobody cares. I mean, as far as I care, but as far as for going to the Celebration Bowl, that junk don't matter. You could win that game, you could lose that game. Wouldn't matter. Great game to get your backups in. Just saying. Now, again, running-wise, running back by committee is a thing, but also the running backs out of the backfield are going to be important. I mentioned, and I told Brian, I said, remember the first time we met? We kept talking about, who's that Leland Willoyd guy? Who's he? That's a guy that, look, ain't a lot of film on him, but that guy and Kelvin Dean got that Bishop Bonnet thing that they can add to the offense. Just look out for it. Coming out of the backfield, swing passes. And the other thing that you missed out of your running back last year, it was that running back, the route where really Xavier Smith, it becomes Xavier Smith's wheel route. But it's really the running back runs something very similar to where he runs out of the backfield and up the hash. And all of a sudden, it's a running back versus a linebacker in space. That's something we lost last year. We did not have. And we kind of were getting it, but then our running back gets hurt. Running back's no longer on the team. That's something else to look for. Look for that running back being able to carry linebackers. And all of a sudden, you get those linebackers that, granted, they're not the FBS linebackers that Jackson State had before. They're FCS linebackers. you're challenging those guys in coverage. I think you're going to challenge those guys in coverage. They're going to have to carry FAMU's running backs, and they're not only going to carry them out into the flats, but I think it's going to be that other piece that you had in Bishop Bonner that we didn't talk about, where Bishop Bonner actually ran legit routes. Like he ran routes where he actually went up the field and attacked the linebackers or the safeties in coverage. And now that's going to open up additional places for the running backs, the tight ends, and some of your slot receivers. Like all of a sudden, you can run some rub routes. They're not picks, they're rub routes that can really start to kind of wreak havoc on that defense, especially if the defense is running man to man. Like we've seen where in the past Jackson State was very man heavy. Honestly, in that South Carolina State game, they had moments. But if you can get them in the habit of running that base defense from last year, whereas a lot of man to man, those pick routes started to open stuff up because all of a sudden you're in coverage trailing a receiver and you get picked, which FAMU has done before. Like let's call it spade a spade. FAMU has run its fair share of pick routes. Look at Xavier Smith. Look at that year where it was 7-6 and some of those other things. And let's hope it doesn't rain. Like, let's hope. That definitely changed that game. And maybe for the better for us. But I digress. You start to see like the playbook opens up when FAMU can throw to the running back. And that all of a sudden puts your linebackers at a disadvantage because now they're covering speed and space. And FAMU's running backs are fast for the most part. And you got some guys that are plotters, and they're going to do what they're going to do. Terrell Jennings, I'm looking at you too. I'm looking for you. I'm looking for some pads to be cracking. Like, I'm just saying. That's there. As far as offensive line, can the offensive line stay healthy? And how are they going to deal with this heat? The heat is the heat. It's a slightly different heat than Tallahassee heat. And honestly, if we're going to be honest, if you're from Florida, it's one of those, if you know things. South Florida heat and Tallahassee heat are different. And it's the type of humidity. Tallahassee's just humid. Like, respectfully, the heat in Tallahassee and the humidity in Tallahassee is horrible. South Florida is a lot better. The game's going to be at about 3. So you're playing pretty much at the hottest part of the day and you're not in the shade. Like, hopefully y'all are drinking pickle juice right now, but it's going to be an issue. Defensively, FAMU's got to stop the run. If FAMU can stop the Jackson State run, you're making their quarterback throw against maybe the best secondary in the conference. That could be a good thing. Last year, it didn't matter because we not only couldn't really stop the run, we couldn't get to the quarterback. But the other thing was, go back and look at that game against South Carolina State, and you're going to notice these Jackson State tackles struggled against speed rushers. I thought I was the only one who noticed it. And then I kind of, I watched somebody else, Scotty, and he said the same thing. I was like, thought I was the only one who noticed it. I was going to say it, but you already dropped that dime. So he struggled. And FAMU's edge rushers are speed rushers. FAMU has normally 2 speed rushers on the outside, 2 interior linemen on the inside. The interior linemen pretty much are there to clog up the middle, try to get a double team. And if you can get a double team for one of them, hopefully it puts one of your tackles really one-on-one against a defensive end. So that's really what FAMU wants. And then last year, Jackson State, they kept their running backs to help block too. So that was something else. Like, be cognizant as a fan and as a coach that they're probably going to keep those running backs back to block, which that can be a good or a bad as well, because that gives the quarterback additional time, but it also takes a guy out of coverage. Do you now start to blitz linebackers? Do you start to try to find other ways to create? Do you blitz corners, safeties? Can we not blitz the far boundary corner? Like, doesn't make any sense if they're throwing quick routes for you to blitz the far boundary corner. At best, he might tip the ball because he's like 6'2", 6'3", but at worst, you just left a wide receiver open. Just saying. Other thing is going to be special teams. Like, that South Carolina State game versus Jackson State game changed on special teams, largely because Honestly, South Carolina State just threw a freshman out there and just let him hang. And your freshman year, straight out of high school, he ain't kicking bombs. He wasn't kicking bombs. He had a few pretty good, solid kicks, but for the most part, they struggled to flip the field. And go back and look at how many times Jackson State is in plus position on the field where they're close to their own 40, close to their own 50, near midfield, compared to South Carolina State. That changes the game. Really, the game kind of changes a little bit once South Carolina State gets a decent punt. And I believe it's a running punt where Max John's rolling to the right. He does like a rugby style kick, and he runs and he kicks it, and the ball rolls a little bit, and Jackson State doesn't get a good return out of it. That is when you start to see the first semblance of life from that team, where it's like, oh crap. See, there we go. So hopefully it caught up. Somehow I think I got muted, but yep, there it is. I don't know how I got muted. Special teams. Like you lost an Orange Blossom Classic because of special teams. You also lost because you couldn't score and you had to bench your starting quarterback for a freshman. But at the same point, FAMU's got to kick the ball. You've got to be able to make field goals. We talked last night on ONG Strike Zone where FAMU's really got two kickers, and I treat having two kickers like having two quarterbacks. When I got two kickers, I ain't got no kickers. I got one guy who can kick from distance, and I got another guy that can kick close, but the distance guy isn't as accurate as the other guy. You're telling me in a short breath that neither one of these guys are gonna get into a groove. Like, because part of kicking is just getting into a groove. I was joking with my wife. We were watching the UCF game. She's a UCF grad. The kicker from Kent went to line up, and I was like, he's gonna miss it. She just looks at me. I was like, baby, I can just tell. His steps are off. Like you can look at a kicker's steps and how he's getting comfortable, and you can tell quite often if he's gonna miss it. And you're just looking like, ding, he hits the goalpost. She just looks at me like, I said, I should have put something on that. I could have got a little something tonight. And she's like, whatever, you always. I'm like, hey, at least you know I'm consistent. But with that, it was just one of those things. Like South Carolina State didn't give us a lot to go off of. And with that, we saw that what FAMU can improve on and what FAMU must do. One of the things FAMU must do, again, offensively, you got to establish a run, smart play calling. Smart play calling is going to be very important. Not saying that our play calling is dumb, but saying sometimes we get overly aggressive. Like sometimes we do cute stuff. Like Xavier Smith throws an interception last year because we were cute, and later on in the season he throws a touchdown pass. So you're kind of like you get the good and the bad with that play. But at the same point, don't become one dimensional. Like you have to mix it up. Don't become so intent on establishing the pass that you forget that you got a stable of running backs. Also, grab some nuance from the past and add to it. Be willing to throw to the running backs, not just in the flats, but have the running backs run those routes where they run up the seam, where they run up the hash mark, and they start to make linebackers get uncomfortable because all of a sudden now you can run a play action off of that where the linebacker maybe comes up. And once the linebacker comes up, The running back either can chip block, or he can bounce it out into a route, or he can run almost like a little wheel. Like, you can do several things with your offense with the speed and the talent that you've acquired. Also, FAMU's offensive line is going to be brand new and fresh. Can they stay healthy? Receiving core, you got to get off the ball, but you also got to challenge those corners. They don't have the same secondary they had last year. I said it 3 times. Like, just a big crit style on that. Like, because I meant that stuff. Like, they don't have the same secondary. Challenge them. Try to make them doubt themselves. Like, test their eye discipline, because they're testing yours. Defensively, it goes back. Eye discipline, stop the run, but also challenge their offensive tackles and understand you're probably going to get double teamed. One of the ways that they neutralized Isaiah Land last season, they double teamed him. They had a tackle on him, and the tackle actually did pretty good, but they also use other people to help stop him. Huge thing there. And then lastly, special teams. Special teams is always going to be huge, but especially in this game where you have 2 kickers on both sides that are kind of questionable, and you got a punter at FAMU that already he's supposed to be the next thing. He's supposed to be the next thing since sliced bread. Like, he's that guy supposedly. And with Jackson State, I don't know what they got. Like, so it's gonna be interesting, man. We're gonna head down probably Sunday morning before the game, catch up with some family, do some breakfast type things. I thought about going Saturday night, but we just gonna, have a little daddy-daughter time, go to the game, do some stuff like that, man. So, maybe watch some TV, watch some movies. And if we do, we might use cablebustertv.com. Cable Buster, who you gonna call? Cable Busters, starting at $35 per month on up to 3 devices, 813-360-1902, cablebusterstv.com. Also, check out Results Only Fitness if you're in the Kennesaw, Georgia area. Results Only Fitness. Also, if you're in the party, and I'm telling you, I'm not doing a darn thing that is blue that weekend, but the good brothers from Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated are doing something where they are in conjunction with the Miami-Dade chapter of the FAMU National Alumni Association are throwing a party, a little tailgate from 11 a.m. until hopefully, you can swing by the tailgate, do a little celebration. Also, the golf tournament was today. Tell me who won. Tell me who won. I would love to know who won the golf tournament. So then next week, hopefully, we're going to be in Tampa Bay, where the Rattlers are going to be at Raymond James Stadium taking on the Bulls. So we're going to talk about that next week, though. This week, we're going to talk about the OBC. And post-OBC, we're going to do our instant reaction where we're going to, hey, the game just ended. How do we feel about it? What's going on? We're going to do that in lieu of our normal show. We might even do a little something special for you on Monday since it's Labor Day. Y'all chill at home. We're doing a little bit. So that being stated, though, man, as we head out of here, big shout out HBCU Digital Network. This is home to Herb Sewell and the Black Techies, man. Check some of the upcoming content we just pushed out. There's some content from the MEAC SWAC challenge that was released. We also have Herb Sewell and his band report. Go check out Herb talk about the latest and greatest in HBCU bands. And if you haven't already, vote for FAMU for the band competition. Y'all know what's going on. Y'all see it. And you saw the band performance, a little bit of blast from the past and a lot of new stuff too. But as we head out, as always, we appreciate y'all for listening. And it's always going to be Fangs up.
Yeah, baby, you know what time it is. Now let's get it started.
Are you kidding me? Unreal.
While our HBCUs are mostly known for academic rigor, community, they also know how to turn up.
Dorsey, have it.